morning. I'm Gary Jedlovic, the Chief of the Earth Science Branch, one of 5 science branches at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. I'll be your host this morning for this special emphasis program. You may have noticed when you walked in through the lobby that you had an opportunity to provide an email address to fill out a survey that will be sent to you. The survey, or your input to the survey, is very important to the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity at Team Redstone. On the Redstone Arsenal here. It helps drive some changes in how information is shared with respect to cultural awareness in the future. So if you missed that opportunity when you came here, please try to provide your email and you'll receive a survey on your way out today. So again, I'd like to welcome all of you here to this collaborative Army, FBI, and NASA day with the 2023 Martin Luther King Observation event. Its theme this year is, "It's a day on, not a day off." I'd like to welcome a couple of our special guests here. Mr. Bill Marks and Robert Champion from NASA, and Mr. Langout from AVMIC. Welcome, please. The special emphasis programs are put in place by Team Redstone to synergize a more effective use of resources that heighten creativity and innovation from diverse perspectives. Team Redstone also seeks to enhance opportunities and inclusiveness to promote cohesive and collaborative working environments, moving from equality to equity for all cultures, ethnicities at the center and its workforce. We have an outstanding group of speakers here this morning that will talk to you about diversity, equity, and inclusion, STEM education, and service to the community. So to start our program off, let's please stand for the singing of the national anthem by Renata America.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Renata. I always enjoy your singing of the national anthem. It's been my pleasure over the last... You may be seated, please. It's been my pleasure and privilege over the last few years to work in a leadership capacity with our welcome speaker. Larry Leopard is the Technical Associate Director at Marshall Space Flight Center, where he provides expert advice on all facets of the center's responsibilities by conducting special studies, He provides authoritative advice and assistance in policy review, managing and reporting center-wide and directorate metrics, and in developing benchmark strategies. Please join me in welcoming Larry Leopard.
Thank you, Gary, and good morning. And on behalf of our Center Director, Ms. Jody Singer, I would like to welcome all of you here to the inaugural Redstone Arsenal Martin Luther King Jr. Observance event. It's very important for us to observe Dr. King's birthday by recognizing the groundbreaking civil rights actions he took to end segregation, enabling people of color to vote, and furthering legislation to create equality among American citizens. As you will hear today, it is important to not only learn about Dr. King on this day, but to honor his work with a day of service. Gary's actually going to provide additional details toward the end of this program about the event that will be coming up on Monday, January the 16th. So please make a special note and plan to participate. Dr. King knew that a successful education lays the foundation of a great society, and that is work that NASA and the Marshall Space Flight Center strives to accomplish every day. Our mission is to drive advances in science, technology, aeronautics, and space exploration to enhance knowledge, education, innovation, economic vitality, and stewardship of Earth. At Marshall, we're very proud of the STEM education outreach in our community that we accomplished throughout the years with events such as Artemis on the Square. I hope some of you were able to attend that. The Huntsville Comic and Pop Culture Expo, and our Speakers Bureau engagement in our local schools really routinely. Marshall is also dedicated to outreach at minority-serving institutions to educate students regarding internships and job opportunities at our center. And just this last fall, Marshall hosted our 7th annual HBCU and Minority Serving Institution Partnerships meeting. NASA and Marshall are looking for the best and the brightest to join our team and to help us deliver on our mission. And we find that through true connections made with HBCUs and minority serving institutions at those events. All those different forms of outreach support Marshall's dedication to cultivate and support a diverse and innovative workforce with a commitment to unity, diversity, and inclusion. We do this by continuously working with our Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity, following their lead to help improve diversity and civil rights policies, programs, and services, enabling the universe of available talent to actually contribute inclusively and equitably to NASA. We know that a diverse and inclusive team contributes in ways that are impossible to measure. Everyone provides a unique perspective and experience to our workforce, and that makes us much stronger. Marshall's workforce tomorrow will be diverse in every sense, and reaching out to the next generation to ensure they have access to education and job opportunities must be a part of our way forward. I personally would like to thank the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity for thoughtfully planning this program and others like it, and creating safe places to connect and learn. Additionally, a big shout out and thanks to our Redstone partners today and our keynote speakers, Mr. John Meredith and Reverend Don Darius Butler. Before I head off the stage, I would like to highlight one of my favorite personal quotes from Dr. King. He gave this quote in a speech that he did called "Conquering Self-Centeredness" in Montgomery, Alabama on August 11th, 1957. And I quote, "An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity." I think this quote encompasses the overall mission of NASA, which simply put is to move all humanity forward together. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the Julius R. Scruggs Child Development and Academy Choir to recite the I Have a Dream speech. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
Because he took a stand for peace and dreamed that he would find a way to spread equality to all humankind. Because he hated violence and fought with words, not guns, and won a timely victory as one of freedom's sons. Because he died for liberty, the bells of history ring to honor the accomplishments of Martin Luther King.
Yes, Martin Luther King had a dream for the future, a dream that one day taught black people no longer had to draw a trail to the back of a bus for a seat or stand there with no seats in the black section, but could board any bus, take a front seat, and rest their weary feet. Yes, Martin Luther King had a dream.
A dream that one day black people no longer had to go to the back door to be served a hamburger ice cream cone, but they could go to the front door of their favorite restaurant, sit down at the table of their choice, and eat a fine meal.
Yes, Martin Luther King had a dream.
A dream that one day thirsty little black boys and girls could race up to any water fountain, get a drink, and not have to wonder why their mothers hurriedly snatched them away from the fountain with the strange sign, whites only.
Yes, Martin Luther King had a dream. A dream that black families worried from traveling could go into any motel and ask for a room without being denied because of the color of their skin. Yes, Martin Luther King had a dream. A dream deeply rooted in the American dream. A dream that one day
Sons of former slaves and sons of foreign slave owners will be
Able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood, a dream that one day even the state
Of Mississippi will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. A dream that little
children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that in the state of Alabama, right there in Alabama, little
black boys and girls will be able to join hands with
little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers.
I have a dream today.
This is our hope.
This is our faith. With this faith, we should be able to transform the dangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this
faith will be able to work together,
To pray together.
To struggle together.
to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the
day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And if America is to be a great nation,
This must become true. So,
Let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the hiding Alleghenies of Pennsylvania.
Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado.
let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
But not only that,
let freedom ring from the stone mountains of Georgia.
let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain, Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when we let this happen, when we let freedom ring from every village and every hamlet, every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men,
Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Wow, wow, that was really outstanding. Really do want to thank these young men from the Child Development Center and Academy and their leaders there for really an outstanding highlight of today's presentations. And also I want to thank Larry for his warm welcome and his inspirational comments. Meant a lot to me, and I think everybody else in the room. Also, I failed to recognize a couple others of our distinguished guests here, Brian Wood and Joe Ginta. Please feel welcome and hope you enjoyed the program. We have several invited guests with us this morning who have agreed to participate in a short panel discussion. To introduce them, I would like to call up Ms. Dana Easy. Dana is the Deputy Manager of the Science and Technology Office at Marshall. She supports the Science and Technology Office, leading the organization that plans, develops, and executes a broad range of science and technology investigations, programs, projects, and activities in support of NASA's science, technology, and exploration goals. The office also leads the pursuit of new opportunities and partnerships with industry and other government organizations. Please join me in welcoming Dana.
Good morning. I'm extremely happy to be here, and I was so thrilled to be invited to do this panel discussion in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I think we're going to have a really good and really interesting and insightful discussion, and if there's time, we will take questions from the audience. So I would like to invite our two speakers to come up now, and I will introduce them each, and they also have a quick individual presentation to have as well. So our first speaker will be Dr. John Meredith. His position as president of the City Council and representative of Huntsville's District 5 is responsible for the legislative branch of the Huntsville City government. Mr. Meredith has had an extensive career in public policy, working with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle on issues such as emergency relief legislation, job creation, reform of employer-based visas, and agricultural research. He has been on numerous issue-driven television and radio programs as a policy expert. Mr. Meredith has set up numerous political action committees and founded a corporate training program to train companies and citizen groups to influence law and policy. Mr. Meredith is also the son of civil rights icon James H. Meredith, the first African American enrolled at University of Mississippi. Please welcome Mr. John Meredith.
There's a little technical difficulties. Thank you all. As a son of James Meredith, I've been fortunate enough to be part of what they call a movement kid, the children of civil rights leaders. And there is a connection between many of the civil rights families. So I have been fortunate enough to have at least transactional relationships with Martin Luther King III, Coretta Scott King, who actually would come to school, pull me out of class, and we would talk in the principal's office. And I did have the opportunity to meet the man of the day, Martin Luther King Jr. But I do really only think of him and know him as the guy that filled in for my father when he was shot in 1966 on his March Against Fear. The pathway to Martin Luther King Day becoming a national holiday as well as it becoming a day of service. And there's a significant misconception about the holiday. It was not initially created as a day of service. Most folks give John Conyers, the long-serving representative in the House of Representatives from Detroit, as being the person responsible for the creation of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And it is true that Representative Conyers introduced bills in the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, for 14 years in a row, from 1968 to 1982. However, the person that actually managed to get the bill passed was little-known representative from Gary, Indiana, called Katie, whose name was Katie Hall. Katie took over the bill and sponsored it in 1983, and did in a very short amount of time, I believe it was only 2 months. She was able to get the bill passed that Mr. Conyers could not pass in 14 years. She not only got it passed in the House, there's always a Senate companion bill, and that passed as well. But she didn't just get it passed by the skin of her teeth. Her and her companion in the Senate actually passed the bill in both chambers of Congress with a veto-proof margin. Therefore, President Reagan, who had been on the record as not supporting the creation of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, was forced. He wasn't forced. They could have, it would have become law even if he vetoed it, but because it passed the Congress with a veto-proof margin, he signed the bill. I guess he signed it under protest because there was language in that it would not be observed until 2 years later. So it was first observed and celebrated in 1986, despite being passed in 1983. Now, it was passed late after January, after his birthday in '83, so that was missed anyway, but then the 2 years that was written into the legislation itself pushed back the celebration and observation of the holiday until 1986. However, it was not celebrated in all 50 states until the year 2000. Just as a side note, this legislation cost Katie Hall her seat, and she lost her reelection. The reason that it was not celebrated in all 50 states in '86 had to do with state-level passages of the implementation of the law, which is not an unusual thing, happens all the time. That's one of the reasons we have Star ID on the Alabama driver's license, is because the state of Alabama is not recognizing the Real ID Act. So that's not entirely unusual. However, the state implementation of the law was a nightmarish hodgepodge of legislative tricks that included everything from going ahead and observing it but not calling it Martin Luther King Day, to an outright, can't think of the proper word, but not celebrating it as a paid holiday, but rather forcing the people of the state to celebrate it on a Sunday so that it would not be a paid holiday. The most notable state failure to recognize King Holiday was actually in the state of Arizona, and really only became nationally known because the National Football League refused to hold a Super Bowl there until they passed the holiday. Now, the state of Arizona actually failed to meet that obligation, and the Super Bowl was moved from Phoenix to the Rose Bowl out in California. But ultimately, the state of Arizona caught up, and it was celebrated. However, it was not until the year 2000 when the state of New Hampshire changed the name from, I believe it was Civil Rights Day, to Martin Luther King Jr. And that's when we start the clock on him actually having a holiday in his name and his honor in the year 2000. However, as I said earlier, a day of service was not associated with the initial passage of the legislation. It was just another passive holiday, just like all the others. It was not until 1994 when Representative John Lewis decided that the best way to honor King would be to create a day of service. And he did that primarily based on who he was as an individual and his belief that the USA was built and founded on service, that we didn't, as a nation, wait on local, state, or federal government to act on anything, that we as people came together and just did what was needed at the time. And Lewis felt that Martin Luther King would not want a day in his remembrance to be merely a day of reflection and passivity, but rather one of service. So in 1994, Lewis introduced a bill to challenge Americans to transform MLK Day into a day of citizen action and volunteer service in honor of the civil rights legend. I believe, with good source and background material from friends and those that knew John Lewis, although I did know him, and when I was lobbying Congress, he was very nice to me and allowed me to use his office kind of as a personal pit stop whenever I needed it. But he was motivated by one of King's speeches in which Mr. King declared, "If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among us shall be your servant." That is the new definition of greatness. By giving that definition of greatness, it means that anybody can be great because everybody can serve. Bernice King, Martin Luther King's daughter, certainly suggests that Representative Lewis was correct in his assumption, as she has stated her father's call that an individual has not started to live until he or she can rise above the narrow confines of their individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of humanity. As she, in her own words, says, he, meaning her father, would certainly applaud the fact that our nation has set aside a day where we can become more centered rather than self-centered and focused on the broader concerns of humanity. As she likes to say, nothing is insignificant as you celebrate the King Day. Remember, you are important, you are significant, and you have something that you can offer to make humanity a better place. Now, it's hard to compete with the deeds of Martin Luther King Jr. or Representative John Lewis or the thoughts of Bernice King. But I would challenge each of you as leaders in the greater Huntsville community to not limit yourselves to a single day of service on Martin Luther King Day, but to serve your community on an ongoing basis through any number of means that inspires hope to those less fortunate than yourself, fosters opportunities for future leaders, increases the resources of organizations delivering services and educational opportunities, and strengthens the resolve of those individuals engaged in any of the aforementioned pursuits. By doing so, you will enrich humanity and make Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that much closer to becoming reality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meredith. That was fascinating. I did not know the history of, I think we often take for granted all the work that goes into passing these bills and how long it really takes, and I think that is really interesting. Okay, so our next panel member is Reverend Don Darius Butler. Reverend Butler is pastor of First Missionary Baptist Church, and he is a proud native of the island of New Providence, nestled in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Reverend Don Darius Butler was nurtured in the Christian faith in the Pentecostal tradition and professed his hope in Christ as a Baptist. In his formative years, Reverend Butler received a clear assurance of a divine call to preach the gospel and gave full evidence of his calling at the Mission Baptist Church of Nassau, where he was later licensed and ordained. The teenage minister moved more than 1,500 miles from his native Nassau, Bahamas, to Nashville, Tennessee, where he matriculated at American Baptist College, graduating summa cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Bible and Theology. Please welcome Reverend Don Darius Butler.
Grace and peace to you, sisters and brothers of the human family. I am extremely honored and delighted to be with you today in celebration of America's best friend and her chief prophet, Martin Luther King Jr. I'm delighted to share this moment with John Meredith, who is the successor, the inheritor of a tradition of noble courage from his father, and who, like all the children of civil rights icons, bear the mark of freedom in their consciousness, in their nurture, and in their upbringing. Indeed, I'm moved by the scholars of our church school, these young men who have remixed one of the iconic sermonic addresses of Dr. King. And it is that refrain, "I have a dream today," that demands an audible, particularly in an aspect of Dr. King's life that goes unexamined. He had the gaze of an eagle-eyed prophet, not simply challenging the deficiencies of a nation to live up to the ideal it articulated in its founding documents, but a hope and a zeal that we could be everything that we said we were at the establishment of those papers. But for King, that hope lied in our ability to attend to those who are most vulnerable among us, the children. The children came to mind in that Birmingham jail as he responded to the 8 white clergymen who challenged his coming to Birmingham, his agitation, if you will, branding him an outsider, a troublemaker, and finding the scraps of paper that would be slipped under the bars of the cell, he articulated a response that needed to get out. Among the things that he said, he reminds them that he was a father who had to look into the face of his daughter and explain to her why she could not go to the new amusement park that had been advertised on television. He had to see the clouds of inferiority begin to form in her mental sky. And he reflected back on that day at 6 years old at the dinner table at Auburn Avenue in Atlanta when his parents had to tutor him on the social dysfunctions of American segregation. Up until that age, he had played with the son of the white grocer across the street. But when time came for them to go to elementary school, that friend, his playmate, was told by his father he could no longer play with Martin. And it caused Martin great consternation. It is something that happens in the lives of our children, ebony children and brown children in this nation, where they must come face to face with a reality. Though things are getting better, there are some people who would like them to remain the same. It is a reality that they must face, as W.E.B. Du Bois gave to us, this veil that's cast upon our humanity that challenges us to really deconstruct systems that vitiate the dignity of all life, particularly in black and brown bodies. This is the driving force of King as he takes that movement to Chicago in 1965 and 1966 for the freedom movement and moves his children into this cramped apartment in the Lawndale community to fight for fair housing for those who were paying more in rent in the slums of Chicago than those who were paying for nice plush condos in the suburbs. And he got to see firsthand what systems of poverty and what policies that create and perpetuate slums would do to the human spirit. For in a short time frame, he sees the kind of breaking down of reality in the lives of his own children. He sees it again in Watts after the riots, as a young man is running through the city and is making noise about we won, and King is wondering, what does he mean we won, with scores of people dead and great damage and disaster to businesses, many arrested? And the young man says, we finally made them pay attention to us. This is the call for us today, as the dream still is before us, to pay attention to those who we have hidden in plain sight, to extend ourselves beyond our comforts to ensure that the dream lives. Martin King, as the late Kelly Miller Smith Sr. said, was no slain civil rights leader. He was a martyred prophet who was killed for doing what prophets do. The video that ran before the opening of this assembly made it very clear he was a man of God, one who understood that grand vision, conversant in the rhetorical tradition of American democracy, her most faithful and ardent student of its tenets, who could articulate for us the path, the way forward. Now, 55 years after his martyrdom, we've been chasing this elusive dream. Generations who did not march in Selma, who do not know the struggle of Montgomery or Birmingham, who were not alive to see the campaigns, 13 of which he led, under the constant threat of death, are still the inheritors of this grand and noble legacy. But it is up to us, as our brother John Meredith has shared, to take up the mantle not just in acts of civil piety, of charitable service, but of a commitment to justice. That we challenge the very systems that create the inequities in our midst rather than placing a band-aid over the problem. That we summon the moral courage wherever we show up to represent the ideals of the idea of America. That we would sing with liberty, with purity, in sincerity, because we could celebrate the beauty of its diversity. Dare we? Shall we? If not for ourselves, at least for the children.
Thank you, Reverend Butler. Okay, so we have some questions, and we'll go through, and then if there's time, we'll take some audience questions as well. So I think the first one, we'll start with you, Mr. Meredith. Do you feel that our current multi-generational workforce is upholding the culture of diversity and inclusion that Dr. King drew out in his I Have a Dream speech?
Is withholding it. Withholding it.
Upholding.
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 Okay. I'll be honest, no. I really don't feel that way. I think that we have made some strides. I think depending on what sector of the economy you are in, there have been more strides made than in others. But unfortunately, I think education it plays a big role in that. The inability for students of color, be they black, be they Hispanic, be they, well, there's some that actually do well, because Asians have always done well. But certainly among blacks and Hispanics, there is an educational deficit, which we still have to overcome in order for certain segments of the economy to be universally equal. For those that do attain a certain level of education and expertise, it's one thing to have the education, but can you apply it in a way that is needed by the companies? For those that have that, they do very well, and they are integrated, and their ideas and their abilities are utilized. But that's not the majority, and unfortunately, until that becomes a reality, certainly certain segments aren't. Now, even the segments that don't require that high level of education, you find that there still is not equitable numbers of blacks compared to, and Hispanics, compared to our white and, say, Asian employees. But again, I think that those industries have certainly shown better parity, and they are increasing their numbers, but are we there yet? No, not in my opinion anyway.
To follow up on that a little bit, what do you think in the workplace, what sort of initiatives would help with fostering a diverse and inclusive environment?
To be quite frank, folks are going to have to take some chances. Folks are going to have to give opportunities to blacks and browns that may not have on paper all of those things that the employer is looking for, but have the potential to get there. And by nurturing that in them, starting as an intern, starting as that GS0, that GS1 or 2, and not just letting them clock in 8 hours a day, but giving them that training, exposing them to the opportunities that exist. They can certainly build themselves up to that standard. So I think no matter what the company is, Take a chance on someone. Sure, they may not all work out, but you know what? It's going to make it a stronger place to work. The folks that are working there, the employees there are going to see that you have made a commitment, and that is going to resonate. That middle management, God love middle management because they're the ones that really make or break a lot of institutions. And if they see that you are taking, or the company is taking an interest in nurturing the people at the bottom, they know that they're in a good company, and they know that they too will be nurtured by the senior management to rise to that level as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Reverend Butler, so we hear a lot today about cancel culture. And I think as a pastor, you probably have some thoughts on Dr. King's request of us to be a forgiving society and to have forgiveness for our enemies. So how do you think this cancel culture fits in with Dr. King's exhortation to be forgiving?
This phenomenon, I think, forecloses possibilities for conversation and opportunities for awareness, for admission, and a word that is in my Christian tradition but should become more common in the vernacular of a nation: repentance. What does it mean to atone and make amends for wrongs committed, wrongs that are owned responsibly, and a commitment that says, I wish to repair and make right what has happened? As we see it play out in culture, it is about denying the spotlight to someone who has committed some social faux pas or whatever egregious act. But all of us at any given moment could be subject to some failure and should be granted an opportunity as an act of grace to learn, to engage it thoroughly, to rid ourselves of whatever ideas do not bear in reality, and make amends.
Great, thank you. Mr. Meredith, do you believe there are better ways for us to increase awareness and share knowledge to non-African American identifying colleagues, apart from institution-led bias and diversity viewpoint training? Do you think there are ways that we could be doing this?
The best, and I would argue the most productive way, are personal relationships. Get out there and interact with someone who doesn't look like you. Find that common ground, and then share your experience with those who do look like you about those who don't, and challenge them to do the same. Challenge them to get outside of their comfort zone and expose themselves to another culture. You know, one of the funniest things, I'm going off on the side here, but one of the funniest things to me is how some of the most council culture driven people here, and it's not just here, it's everywhere, gotta lock up the border, don't want Mexicans coming in and taking our jobs, but love Mexican restaurants. Don't get it.
Very true. Okay. It's getting real close to lunch for that kind of comment. Okay. Reverend Butler, how important is purpose and intent in the I Have a Dream speech in today's cultural environment?
It's the most remembered of King's rhetorical masterpieces. He tested here in Huntsville at Oakwood University. And the riff, I Have a Dream, was something he borrows from a black woman, Prathier Hall, who he heard praying, and incorporated it into his own spirit
and you could hear in the background of the recording someone say to him, "Martin, tell them about the dream you had." The moment created that wave that he was able to ride to the seashore. But it really called the nation to moral accountability, because this is 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation is signed. And what he was calling the nation to is a sobering point of accounting for the promise it made to its citizens, so that they would not languish on this island of poverty amidst a vast ocean of material prosperity. He was challenging the nation to live up to the ideals, not in a way that excoriates her, but in a way that says, you can do this. And that kind of passion and purpose, that intentionality that is weaved through that message, weaved through his life, is certainly the stream of purpose that we need to tap into today. But we must not forget, by 1968, the last year of Martin's life, he looks back on that dream and he wonders whether it had become a nightmare. Because much of what was promised, much what was written on that promissory note never materialized. And we now who live in the wake of it, whether it a dream or a nightmare, must also reckon with that reality, lest we perpetuate the same challenges.
Do you feel the solutions or the actions that need to happen to fulfill those promises are different today than they were in 1968?
Some are the same. If you think about 1955, Money, Mississippi, Emmett Till, we only just got the signage of federal legislation against lynching in 2022. So we've deferred the dream a long time. And we've deferred it, and we're at this moment. This is a critical moment because we're now negotiating what will be the moral landscape of this nation for another generation. And we're doing it not just in legislative halls, we're doing it around corporate boardrooms, we're doing it in government institutions, we're doing it in civil and civic life, the ways we engage the discourse, we're doing it neighbor, friend to friend. But we must be intentional that what we want to leave as our lasting legacy is actually worth living into.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're running short on time. If there are any questions from the audience, I think we have time to take one or two. Anyone?
Gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity to sit and listen to you. I'm Lily Gray, and I'm the member over at Fox Farm Health Center. And sir, to your comment in terms of giving those minorities opportunities when they don't show up with the appropriate skill set, what would you recommend would be the appropriate aperture to go about doing that? Because what I can forecast to be is that you allow those in and then it doesn't pan out. And so what would be the way forward to say, in order for you to meet this criteria, to have a seat or to have an opportunity, these are certain metrics that you need to meet. I'm all for giving opportunities, but I don't want to set us back 10 steps for giving those who don't deserve it those opportunities, and then it creates challenges across the board for everyone else.
Thank you so much for that. I certainly sympathize with that. Frankly, I think it's easiest at the lowest levels because the aperture changes depending on where you are in the company or in the system. A GS0 or a high school intern that's working at your company is not necessarily expected to know, frankly, all that much. So it is easier, and it's a more fuller or more open aperture at that level than it is to take a middle manager and move them into senior management. So because I'm looking at it as universal and not, say, Fox Hospital, it's hard to nail it down. I do have, I'm a medical technologist by trade, so I know a little bit about the hospital setting. So, for instance, if it was a lab person and someone has the criteria and is nationally certified as a phlebotomist, work with them, create your level of expectation, your checklist of what they need to accomplish satisfactorily before they are moved up to, say, not med tech, but a MLT. You know, what's that next step? Perhaps even it is moving them from the morning round phlebotomist to one who then is entrusted with getting those tough sticks, you know, the ones that when most folks in phlebotomy can't get the blood out of it, and generally speaking, it moves to a nurse or someone else, train them to be the one that can get the hard draws. And then from there, perhaps supervising and disseminating the system, the schedules of who works when and that sort of thing. Perhaps even creating a step where they work with the supervisor of phlebotomy to give them those skills, and then work with that supervisor of phlebotomy and give them the training that they need in order to start doing the MLT work and running those tests and understanding what the BUN and creatinine ratio really means, you know, as opposed to just drawing the blood and turning it over. So whatever that aperture is very specific to the task or the job description. And okay, I'm being told I need to wrap up, but but in a general sense, the aperture is dependent on the position, dependent on the skill that a particular job is required to have.
If I could add, and that's great. And I agree. Along with that is opportunities for exposure. In many instances, we come at this with a notion that there is an achievement gap when there is more of an opportunity gap. I cannot become what I have never seen, what I've never been exposed to, what I never know is in my sphere, my orbit of possibilities. And the intentionality about creating opportunities for exposure so that these scholars at this age can see what is possible for their life. That if they are never given that chance, we already foreclose any possibility that they could fill in those places of service.
Thank you very much.
So join me in thanking the speakers once again for a great interactive session. So I also personally want to thank them for sharing with me and us some of the history behind establishment of Martin Luther King Day. And as Reverend Butler said, the dream is still before us, and there's still work to be done. And from the last question and answer, I think they hit at inclusion is very important, and certainly within the government, diversity, equity, and inclusion is some of the things we really strive for. So in sticking with the theme for our day today, a day on, not a day off. Next Monday is a day of service, planned for a number of locations. As you leave, there will be a QR code at the sign-in desk that you can scan to volunteer for several different day of service events. One of those is a downtown rescue mission, and the second one is Deferred Home Maintenance Repair Program. And also, in sticking with what Mr. Meredith said, that the challenge is not just for, his challenge is not just for service for one day, but for continuing service. So in all your programs, there's a list of additional community organizations that need your help and service. So to extend it beyond one day, I encourage you to go to these websites and provide some service to the community throughout the next year. And also, I'd like now to introduce and have Carolyn Magsby come up to the podium. Carolyn is the Deputy Director of the Marshall Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity for closing remarks.
All I can say is wow. I don't know about everyone else, but from start to finish, this event was right on point. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this is not just one day, as we stated earlier. This is for continuing education and awareness. So I would just, let me get on script because I know I have a time limit. I'll be talking like I'm the third panel member. So I do want to say that I know Dr. Martin Luther King is pleased today. And I know we said this is first for NASA. I know Redstone may have also put on programs, but we are really pleased to have partnered with this team here. I want to thank all of you for taking the time for being here today. I'm sure that each of us took something away, especially from our panel members, that they well articulated a lot of things that was education, awareness, and personal experience, and we really appreciate that. I was particularly struck by our guest remarks and, of course, the choir in regard. I just want to give them another round of applause. I appreciate that. It shows that we are educating our young members to, know about these events and what do we do with them. Larry stated at the beginning that education, outreach, and that it's a day on and not a day off, and that's what that means for us. So I would like to also say thank you to Renata. Every time I hear your voice, it brings memories as an Air Force retiree. I just want to say it really brings memories and points things out, so I really appreciate that. Thanks to Gary for doing such a good job on MCing. We really appreciate that. Mr. Larry, it's leaders like you that continue to support these events and make them so important, and all the other leaders that are out there. So thank you for your words and continued support. Thanks to Dana. I know that was a great opportunity. I think you did well with the team here, so we appreciate that. And ODO would like to thank all of Team Redstone. When we say Team Redstone, we're talking about the Army, the FBI, and NASA. So we appreciate the support, the collaboration, and I think this was an awesome event, and I want to continue that collaboration. And I would just like to thank Janet Washington, who is our ODO representative, to help this going. I don't know where Janet at. Okay, Janet, thank you for that. And of course, a very special thank you to our keynote speakers. Your comments. When I first saw Mr. Meredith bio, I was like, I want to be a groupie because I'm actually from Mississippi, and I learned, I knew that. And then when Janet told me about, that the Reverend Butler, I was like, wow, we got two people on here, and your bios speak for themselves, and you did a standing job. So if you could, would you come on stage, please join me on stage? We would like to give you something in appreciation. I'll be quick. You know, we can't thank you enough. We can't give you all the gratitude, but we just want to say, thank you for your time. We really appreciate your words and of encouragement. So I want to give this to you, Mr. John Meredith. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Reverend, I thought you were going to go to church for a minute, so we appreciate your time as well. So thank you, Reverend Butler.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you. So this is not the end. So as a gentle reminder, please provide your email to take our survey. And please join us in the lobby for, some refreshment and a little fellowship if you had the time to do this. This concludes our program for today, but not the ongoing remembrance and celebration of Martin Luther King. So one program doesn't do it, we're going to step out here and do it the next hour, the next day, until we see each other again on another Martin Luther King event. So I just want to say have a great day. And I wrote some notes down from the two of you that I'm going to be researching, reading. So we do appreciate that. And again, thank you for your time, for coming in, and hope to see everyone again. So don't forget refreshments. Everyone loves something to snack on.